All right, so I'm going to pick this one up. This is Amir. He is in the UK. All right, Amir, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys just fine. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, yes. So we have a question or the comment, the topic that you wanted to discuss. I'm going to read this out. It says, preventing a variation of the contingency argument that adds credence to the existence of God. And if that's the case, then why hasn't anybody ever used a variance of the contingency argument that would work to that end before now?
I mean, I think, with such a nuanced topic, there's always going to be new theories, new ideas, and new ways of being able to think about God's existence that, over time we'll see this entire debate just evolving. And yeah, the argument that I do want to present has also been, by my own admission, been refined using artificial intelligence in ways that I think is really advanced from previous iterations of the argument. And I will be using my own lines of defenses to come up with any rebuttals against any attacks that you guys might have against the argument. But yeah, I look forward to presenting it.
Well, let's hear the argument then.
Absolutely. I mean, just in the first instance, just before we build up to that, I just want to define certain terms. So, atheism, we can all agree, is just fundamentally involves a rejection of the claim that a god or any gods exist. And for the purpose of this debate,
why would we agree on the thing we just argued against for 20 minutes?
Sorry?
Why would we suddenly agree on the thing that Eric and I just argued against for 20 minutes?
Saying
that's not our position.
Amir, you may want to repeat what you just said there. I think maybe we misheard it. Try one more time.
So atheism fundamentally involves a rejection of the claim that God exists.
It's a rejection of belief in the claim.
Of the belief in the claim. Okay. I'm happy to make that correction. So for the purpose of this debate, I'm going to coin a new term. I'm going to call it, let's say, an a-naturalist, which fundamentally involves a rejection of the claim that a naturalistic explanation is sufficient to explain why anything at all exists.
Meaning that you would have to resort at some point to magic.
No, it doesn't mean that at all. I think that's
okay. Well, what's the alternative then? If it's not natural, the only option was supernatural. You're saying you're not going for the supernatural, but yet you're holding for a god. So,
I mean, I'm going to pause you there, Aaron. Sorry, do you see? I'm just, for the sake of the debate, I'm just calling a new term called an a-naturalist. Whether or not there are any other alternatives is irrelevant at this point. I just want to ask you both.
You said that natural explanations were insufficient, meaning that you would have to close that gap with magic. You'd have to go to the supernatural, right?
As I see it, correct. There's only two options that we do have: a naturalistic explanation as to why anything at all exists, or something that transcends naturalism, which we can call it supernaturalism.
Magic.
I wouldn't call it magic. No, I think you see the problem with calling it.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah,
you know what a blessing is? Your book. Well, let's see. The Bible and the Quran both support blessings and curses. Do you know what blessings and curses are?
Absolutely. I mean, I just need to clarify.
Magical
I'm not religious. I do believe in God.
One of them is a positive enchantment, that good things will happen, and the other one is a negative enchantment, that bad things will happen. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So magical enchantments. The supernatural equals the magical. You don't believe in magic, but you believe in the supernatural, which means you believe in magic.
I disagree. I mean, supernatural doesn't mean magic or irrational.
You're welcome to be wrong. Go ahead and call it something else because you don't want to call it what it is, but that's fine. Don't call it what it is. Call it whatever, the non-natural, immaterial, metaphysical mind. Call it that. If you need 7 words to replace the word magic, fine, use those.
Sure.
And
I see this.
And Amir, maybe just a little nitpick. I was doing some googling while Aron was talking. So you're coining this term a-naturalist, and you're saying that that is a rejection that a naturalistic explanation is sufficient to explain what we see. There is already a term called supernaturalism that seems to cover that. Are you aware of that term? And if yes, why are you avoiding it?
The term supernatural is, sorry, what, could you repeat that last part?
Sure. The supernaturalism is the opposite of naturalism. Supernaturalism is a belief in the spiritual. So now I understand the spiritual has kind of some loaded language there, and Aron calls it rightfully so, I think, magic, because we're talking about things that cannot be demonstrated, that we have not seen. Are you trying to avoid any type of like loaded language like that, and just simply saying, okay, well, let's just kind of like water down the language to not natural?
Well, what I'm actually trying to do, it's a good point. I'm just trying to reduce it down to an equal playing field, because if atheists reject that there is a supernatural explanation as to why anything at all exists, are they also rejecting that there is a natural explanation as to why anything at all exists? Or are
I would actually stop you right there, because atheists just reject a God. Atheists don't necessarily reject a supernatural. It's not logically impossible that a supernatural exists and yet no gods still exist. So
100%. You can say that with absolute utility. That's true. But for what I'm trying to identify is, as I'm debating you both, irrespective of the wider atheist community, are you both committed to the fact that a-naturalism is just as likely as atheism, as in both of these footings are equally as unlikely?
No, I've met very few people who reject reality entirely. I've met very few people who just reject all of reality in total. It takes a special kind of person to reject reality. To pretend as if everything is a dream or an illusion, it takes quite a detachment from reality. There's not many people that can do it. Most people will accept some natural explanations, but then when it gets to the point where it's beyond their, let's say if they got out of school in 7th grade, well, then they're probably going to be creationists because they didn't understand any of the classes that they didn't take after that. So they wouldn't be able to understand evolution.
And I wouldn't.
It's not about.
Sorry, Amir, go ahead. No, Amir, go ahead and respond to that. Go ahead.
I was just going to make the point. It's not about denying that reality exists. I think we can say, for the most part, unanimously, that
your definition of a-naturalism literally, by definition, denies reality.
No, it doesn't deny reality. It's denying that the origins of reality are due to naturalistic causes, not that reality.
So you accept that there are natural explanations that are sufficient to explain many things in the natural world.
Correct, but I don't think that ultimately explains the root cause of why anything at all exists.
Okay. So what is the problem with the explanation for why anything at all exists? How about the idea that many physicists propose right now is that it's not possible for there to ever have been just nothing?
I've got 2 points to that. The first one is, in the previous debate, you mentioned to the caller that you are not a physicist. So when you are now referring to physicists in this debate, that is a leap of faith.
Yeah, I did refer to physicists. I didn't declare myself a physicist.
Sure, but so then what is the relevance? Why are you?
What's the relevance of what experts in their field say? If I tell you what's wrong with my teeth, I'm not going to tell you from my own opinion. I'm going to tell you what my dentist said.
Sure, but I think the scientific community unanimously would agree that we are not equipped to address the root causes of why anything at all exists within an empirical framework.
But let's get back to the idea that physicists generally hold that the first law of thermodynamics, which is quite popular in science, is consistent. They hold that material energy cannot be created or destroyed. Therefore, it wasn't. So what's the problem?
It cannot be created or destroyed. No, I don't understand the relevance of this argument. Could you?
Right. I
or
don't
paraphrase.
understand the relevance of your argument. Exactly. So you're holding that the first law of thermodynamics is void?
No, not at all. I mean, the first law of thermodynamics is established. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. Just
okay. Well, then let's put this in a different category then. Because when I get into arguments with theists, I find increasingly they don't want to talk about anything that I know about. Maybe because they know that I know about it. They only want to talk about things that I have no expertise in. They always want to go back beyond. And so they say that the scientific explanation is insufficient to explain. Well, there's a point where the science is completely sufficient on its own to explain. And this is the part where the Quran and the Bible both collapse into houses of burning cards.
Okay.
So if all we can talk about is why there is something rather than nothing, well, there was always something. There was never just nothing. So that's settled. So natural explanations like evolution completely explain the origin of our species and the development of our humanity. There's no insufficiency to explain that. So where does your God come in?
So are you therefore positing that the universe has always been eternal? If there was always something,
it doesn't matter. As I said, my degree is in anthropology, both physical and cultural. So I study comparative religions on the cultural side. I study evolution on the physical side. Natural explanations totally cover everything with full sufficiency from way beyond the beginning of humans. So there's no deficiency there. The only deficiency might be that you go all the way back to what you think is the very beginning of an eternity, and there is no beginning of an eternity, where you say, well, how come there's something rather than nothing when there can't be nothing? And when the laws of physics imply that there was never a point when there was nothing, when at the very closest you could get is that there's a singularity that pre-exists time, which is not nothing, and that was possibly a remnant of a prior form of a universe. At no point ever, never do you get support for the God of the Bible or Quran. Never happens.
Can I try to steelman your argument first, just before I respond? Because there's a lot to unpack there. You say you're putting your kind of worldview around the origins of the universe, if at all there was an origin, on what the general scientific community says.
Yeah, there was no origin of the universe.
Of which you do not have to be a scientist yourself to unpack exactly what scientists are saying on the matter. You are going and deferring to their expertise, which, by their consensus, they are saying that we don't have to appeal to something supernatural. Is that roughly on?
Let me clarify a little bit. It would not matter if the universe had a beginning. There still is no point ever, never, where material science in any point beyond, if there was a beginning of the universe, from that point on till now, there's no insufficiency, such as would be required by your argument. So where is the insufficiency after that? Let's pretend for a moment the universe had a beginning. From that point on, where is science insufficient? Where do you need to act for magic instead?
If we grant that the universe had a beginning, you're asking what exactly?
Yeah, let's pretend the universe had a beginning, and then where does your God come in?
If the universe had a beginning, then we have to ask what, and the terminology here, you have to be very specific, because to ask something like what came before the beginning is almost nonsensical. So I think there's terms like stance creation and stuff like this.
Okay, let's imagine then that a fourth dimensional universe has a rift in the time-space continuum and floods into a three-dimensional universe. So that just like if you were trying to do an MRI scan of your body, but it only shows up in 2 dimensions, and the scan goes all along your body. When it starts at your head and ends at your feet, somehow your head seemingly appears out of nothing. It didn't literally appear out of nothing, but on the scanner it would look like it did. And then it scans all of your body, always looking at 2 dimensions, all the way through. It's cutaway views until it gets to your feet, and then your feet appear to disappear into nothing. Not literally into nothing, but it would look like it disappeared into nothing. So we have a fourth spatial dimensions plus time. They enter a 3-dimensional universe. They give the illusion of, of reality appearing out of nothing, and then eventually disappearing into nothing. When, after this creative event, whenever after that, is science, natural science, which is the only science, insufficient to explain any of our origins, like origin of species, origins of humanity, origins of religion, and people making up gods? Where does that come in?
I mean, just to that point, I'm completely open-minded to the fact that there are scientific explanations that can explain why the Big Bang happened and what came before the Big Bang. I'm completely open-minded to that.
But that's not what we're talking about now, is it? I said, let's assume that the universe had a beginning and that the Big Bang was a beginning, because the Big Bang was not the beginning of the universe. The Big Bang was the beginning of cosmic inflation, not of the universe itself. But let's pretend, for this argument, that the universe had a beginning, and that after that, and it happened by the means that I just described, for example, or according to string theorists, it was a collision of 2 cosmic brains, BRANES. Let any of those, doesn't really matter, or a multiverse that spawns universes like popping out of existence, like watching bubbles come to a boil in a saucepan. Let's say one of those things happens. After that, where is the point after the Big Bang? If we assume that the Big Bang happened by any means, whatever, after that, where does science become insufficient to explain fuck all?
Science doesn't become insufficient. I think it can adequately explain everything that happens after the Big Bang. But
so science explains everything. Science explains everything.
The other way. We're trying to go the other way, though. No, it explains everything that happened after the Big Bang, but it doesn't explain what happened before the Big Bang. Now, the thing is that there can be
only argument is that you reject a material explanation for the multiverse producing multiple universes, for the fourth spatial dimension inflating 3-dimensional space, for the collision of cosmic brains, all of which could cause a beginning of the universe and a collapsing prior form of the universe, which would result in a singularity that then re-expands, where the arrow of what is it? The arrow of
arrow of time, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah. So after that, so you don't know how everything started. Given 4 material causes for everything to start, if everything started, and so after that, where, if ever, does natural science, ever become insufficient to explain anything?
I think the problem in all of this, just if I can explain it from my point of view, is that, like I said, I'm open-minded to the fact that there could be explanations to the origins of this universe. But what I'm trying to do is look at it from the other end.
Is there a point? Is there any point after that where science becomes insufficient?
No, I've already clarified that.
Okay, so what you've got is given 5 examples for a material explanation for the beginning of the universe, a universe that didn't have a beginning, but we're only going to say that it had a beginning for the sake of the argument. We'll say that it had a beginning. We've got 5 material explanations for it, none of which imply a God, and you're saying that you don't have any instance you can cite where material science fails and we have to turn to magic.
Aron, I think you've reduced this down to just viable explanations as to the origins of this universe and the Big Bang. You see,
funny.
Irrespective of,
you're saying that science has. If you're saying that natural explanations are insufficient,
can I finish my point, please?
Hold on. If you're saying that natural explanations are insufficient, then you have defined it that way. I'm staying in the field you set up.
Can I please finish my point? Like I said, I am completely open-minded to the fact that there are naturalistic explanations as to why this universe exists and why the Big Bang has happened. However, all of those explanations still require an explanation themselves. The multiverse requires an explanation. The reason as to why strings exist in string theory require an explanation. Otherwise, just let me finish my point, Aaron. I'll let you speak the whole time without interruption.
Make another 3 or 4 failed points that are all wrong, and we'll keep saying no, it doesn't, until you get to a valid one, and then I'll stop saying no, it doesn't.
Because all of these explanations, they require an explanation themselves. Otherwise, we have a bigger problem. Otherwise, Aaron,
they don't.
Listen, Aaron, we need to have a dialogue here.
The universe. First law of thermodynamics. Remember,
Aaron.
Wait, hold on. Wait. First law of thermodynamics: material energy cannot be created or destroyed. So it didn't need to be. Every model of cosmogony I'm aware of begins with a singularity, not nothing, but a singularity. So you're arguing that if things were not the way they are, if they were completely different than they are, opposite of what they are, then you might have an argument for God, but only that one argument. Where if reality is wrong, then you're right.
Aaron, you see, I'm arguing for something that's even Aron, I'm arguing for something that's even more fundamental than the first law of thermodynamics. I'm arguing to see, why does the first law of thermodynamics even exist? Now, inevitably, every single explanation that we pursue that has an explanation, there needs to be a starting point, a grounding explanation for everything, because the alternative, Aaron, is an actual infinity, an infinite amount of explanations, or something that is
you don't need an infinite number of explanations. You don't need an infinite regress to explain an eternal aspect. If the universe is eternal, it's eternal. It doesn't need an explanation.
And if you say that it does,
if you say that eternal things still need an explanation, then you better explain the origin of your God.
Okay, but I can do that, but I could do that, but I'm just scared. As soon as I start my explanation, you're going to already jump in with something else. So I need to be very delicate with my wording here. At the end of the day, you're the host, and you're dominating this conversation with every attempt that I try. You're shutting it down before I even can formulate past my first or second sentence.
Try something valid.
Well, the validity is something that can only be expressed once I can finish my point, but you don't let me finish my point, Aaron. So I can tell you why an eternal universe is just nonsensical. We can talk about that, and then we could talk about why God makes.
Well, why don't you argue with physicists? Why don't you argue with physicists about why the universe that they're proposing is invalid? I said my degree is in anthropology. You want to talk about anthropology? You want to talk about comparative religions? You want to talk about evolution? Then talk to me. But I get the impression that if you were at a call-in show with a physicist, if Sean Carroll was on this show, you'd be talking to him about evolution. I bet you. Because that would be the weak spot that you would attack with.
There are also a lot of physicists as well that point out issues with an eternal past, and there's also debate within the own scientific community. My debate is with you. If you are taking everything that a segment of the physics community is saying, then you are doing that as a leap of faith, and that also then becomes.
How would it be a leap of faith to admit that I don't know and I don't care and it doesn't matter? Because it's literally irrelevant.
Because you're still holding what some physicists are saying to be clear.
It does not matter whether the universe. It doesn't matter whether the universe had a beginning. That doesn't change the fact that we are evolving apes, and the Bible and the Quran and all of the other religious scriptures are absolute hogwash. They're made up folklore with no truth in them. No significant truth anyway. We know that there's places like Ethiopia and a Tigris River and all that, but that's it.
Dude, I'm not religious, so you don't have to go off about the Quran or the Bible. Neither we're both in agreement.
So you said that natural science was insufficient to explain. So that's two things you've set up there. One, you have to show that it's insufficient to explain, and you haven't. And then two, you have to have an alternative that is sufficient, and you ain't got one.
I've pointed out to a degree, although not in its entirety, why science cannot explain why anything is.
And I pointed out how you were mistaken. And you refused to acknowledge that I pointed out how you were mistaken. So given that you failed that part...
Actually, no, Aaron, that's not true. Because when I went to go to explain the point, Aaron, when I went to go and explain why some of these theories fall short, your line of defense is, well, I'm not a physicist, therefore I don't know. So in fact,
that wasn't my line of defense. My line of defense was at the crux of it, Aaron, okay, let me finish and we can take goes. At the crux of it, when I pushed you to it, you said that I am not a physicist, but you are still trying to defend points of view that are you a physicist? Are you a physicist?
I'm not a physicist, but
then shut up.
Not a physicist, but I'm
talk about something you know. I know physics better than you do, apparently, even though neither of us are physicists. Talk about something you know and make a valid argument instead of wasting our time. Because there's another cult, there's another atheist, or there's another theist in the queue. We could talk to them. They've been waiting on hold for a while. Do you have an argument?
And whenever you want to terminate this conversation, I'm happy to, but I'm just trying to make a point that this is, again, not a physics-related discussion. And I can point out... Why are you
basing your entire argument on physics?
No, I'm pointing... My entire argument is why things like an eternal past cannot exist and why there cannot be an infinite chain of explanations.
And I've heard physicists explain how an eternal past is possible, in which case you should argue with those physicists. If you want to argue that, go argue with the physicists. With me, you have to... Okay, again, I explained to you, it does not matter if the universe had a beginning or not. Either way, there is no indication of God.
And I would say this much, Aaron, if the entire scientific community could agree that we have an explanation as to why anything at all exists, then yeah, I would concur, but they don't. So even amongst this community that you keep referring to, there is not a unanimous verdict, right? And so I can have an opinion on it. You can have an opinion on it, but I can't challenge your opinion to the nth degree because
you don't have an argument.
I don't know.
You were telling me that initially you started this out by saying that science was insufficient to explain. How did you say? You had a contingency argument that adds credence to the existence of God. Somehow we never got to that.
We haven't got to that.
Last we were on that part of the conversation. Amir was defining a-naturalist for us, and I believe, Amir, you said you were trying to get a-naturalism and naturalism on equal footing, and that kind of stuck out. That kind of stuck out to me because I don't think that's possible by these definitions and by what we currently know. Because you can try to equalize the two as simply saying, well, they're just two sides of the same coin. They're opposite positions about this really tough question. And sure, you can boil it down as much as you can, but there's still a fundamental problem there that will never make them equal. And that problem is, as a naturalist, as a methodological naturalist, I know nature exists. The thing that I'm considering to be the sufficient explanation for all we see, we can verify exists. We all agree it exists. We can all measure it. We can do stuff with it. Okay? With the a-naturalism, or supernaturalism, as the internet calls it, you are now positing something that has not been demonstrated. We don't have evidence for. It is speculation. And until you can actually produce an example of it, I guess that might be a good question, Amir. You can hand wave at our limitations in science. You can hand wave at thinking that it's nonsensical. Any explanation we can come up with naturalism is nonsensical. You didn't mention contradictions in there. You just simply said it doesn't make sense, which that's a problem on its own, but we'll let that go. I can ask you, Amir, can you present to me one example of something that is not natural so we can at least just bring that category of items into the pool of consideration? Can you present me one example of something that's not natural?
Can I produce one example of something that is not natural?
Yes. Just show me it exists. Just show me it's real.
When you say show me it exists, show me it's real. Is that like get a telescope out, point it in the sky, give you a particular coordinate, and hey, if there's God waving on the other side, you'd be like, oh, actually, you know what, God does exist, because that's not the line of inquiry that we can take to build credence. Okay,
so here's the thing. Okay, here's the thing. When you ask me, hey, produce me something that's natural, I'll hold up this pen and say, hey, this pen is a natural object in the natural world we live in. I've given you an example.
That's not fair.
No, it's absolutely fair. No, hold on. Because I can't sit here and say, well, I don't know what explains this pen. So I can now invent something that I can't show to others, that I can't demonstrate. I can assign it whatever attributes willy-nilly that I want. And then I can say, well, the pen's explained by this thing. I could call it unicorns. Aron calls it magic. Other people call it the supernatural, or if you just want to be completely accurate, it's the not natural. Yeah.
Again,
what I'm trying to get at is naturalism and a-naturalism will never be on equal footing until a-naturalism can show us that something outside nature actually exists. And you said, well, would we just point a telescope in the sky and see God? I don't know how you would do that. That's not my problem to define how you would do that. It's up to you as the person making the claim that this thing exists is to show us some type of evidence it exists. Until then, I have every justification to reject it and say, I'm not going to consider this as an explanation. The same way that I don't consider the super duper natural as an explanation for the supernatural, and so on and so forth. I don't need to consider this because, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought that was when you were done.
No,
okay.
No worries.
We can wrap it up. Look, guys, I'll say this much. First and foremost, thank you so much for giving us the time to debate these really important issues. I know these things get often a little bit heated during the time, but we're all very passionate about trying to investigate the truth.
I agree.
And I'm going to give credit where credit is due. You guys are both highly intelligent people, and I really appreciate the time. And yeah, hopefully maybe I can call back in the future. We can continue trying to hash this out a little bit more. But otherwise, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Amir.
Thanks.
And hopefully you never get to know me. Hopefully you never get to know me actually in real life, because I will completely change your mind about the intelligence thing. But thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Amir.
Thank you for watching that clip. If you enjoyed it, perhaps you should join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
At patreon.com/calltheline.